friends, lovers of freedom across the world. I welcome you to this amazing program. Wherever you are joining me from, I appreciate you and I thank you for being part of this program. Please like and share the program on your platform. Share to family and friends. Share to everyone that is close to you so that they can be part of this very platform and be able to send information across. Fellow Biafrans and people of the world, viewers across the world, in this very platform, we do not come here to instigate violence. We do not come here to preach hate. We don't come here for saga or to attack any individual. What we do in this platform is to send information across to the world on the true situation of things in Biafra land and in the contraption called Nigeria. There are so many things that are not being taken note of. There are so many things that are happening that are being told in a different form. In this platform, we bring those information to your doorstep and tell you exactly how things are. There are certain videos that you might not be able to come across on the media. Some videos that are hidden from the eyes of the people, we bring them out and share it through the social media so that the world will be aware of what is going on in the contraption called Nigeria. I welcome every one of you, and I'm going to share a very important information as we speak. I want you to watch this video from the beginning to end. You will understand what we are talking about. So many things that you can't see online. You are going to see it here. So listen to this very video from the beginning to end, and I bet you're going to enjoy it. Let us watch it together and see.
Now to the message, run, good luck, run. According to this day newspaper, that's the message that's starting to resonate across parts of Nigeria, particularly the north, asking former President Goodluck Jonathan to seek a second mandate. They argue that he's got experience as well as energy, hindsight, foresight and drive. But given the fact that Mr. Jonathan has already tilled that political garden before his campaign faltered and he stuttered out of office, why would he want to go it again? Or perhaps the question should be, why wouldn't he, in a country where former heads of state have returned and achieved electoral success? But why is the North tying its leadership aspirations to former President Jonathan? What could be in it for the region beyond showing general disgruntlement with the Tinubu administration, who they appear to hold responsible for the current hardship in Nigeria? Well, for their perspective on this and the other issues of the day, I'm joined now in the studio by the current affairs analyst and dean of the School of Postgraduate Studies at Bayes University, Abuja, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, and by the policy strategist and group CEO of the Global Investment and Trade Company, Baba Yusuf, who's also a special economic zones expert. And the reason we brought that up will be apparent shortly. I'm going to come to you in a minute, but let me start with you, Prof. The issue, this is an issue of domestic politics.
Yeah.
And the story in this day newspaper, which I believe you've seen, suggesting that the North is trying to draft President Jonathan in as a candidate in the 2027 presidential election. I'm wondering why the North. Obviously, we'll talk to you because you're from you're from the North. But let me get his, perspective first. I'm wondering why the North is trying or tying its leadership aspirations to former President Jonathan. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think, Charles, it's very interesting development, and it's also good for us to break things down first. When we talk about the North, we have to put things in context. Recent politics is beginning to show us that the North is not necessarily the monolithic North that we used to talk about those days. If we're talking about the North, we're probably talking about the Northwest, the Northeast,
and Northeast, yeah,
because they are very potent.
Opposed to North Central.
North Central, because they're very potent in terms of their politics and in terms of their ability to determine who leads this country. And again, if we're talking about the Northeast and the Northwest, then who are the individuals, who are projecting this development? Maybe one or two individuals who are probably influential, maybe governors, and of course the reason is very obvious. Perhaps they want to show their disaffection with President Tinubu, and of course they belong to the other party, other parties other than the APC. And they are thinking about how they are probably leverage on the status of the president or former President Jonathan. Not necessarily because they like President Jonathan as a person, but because they know that he can still become president, and because in the past he cannot probably run more than once anymore. If another candidate is going to be brought up
That's
to
a good
challenge,
point. Yeah.
to be brought up to challenge President
They'll want
Tinubu,
2 terms.
they will want 2 terms, definitely, irrespective of the promise that they will give. So President Jonathan is looking suitable, for the planners, as it were, and of course, it also tells us that, thinking, arrive in the build-up to the 2027 presidential election. Ordinarily, you want to say that is it not too early in the day for us to be talking about 2027? But this is politics, this is Nigeria, you cannot necessarily you cannot necessarily periodize things, Political horse trading back and forth is rife now, it's gradually beginning, and things are running fast. So it's okay if they start the permutation, but we need to understand the context in which the agitators, are operating from. First, like I said, break down the North, come down to the individuals who are interested. Then second, think about the person, the identity, the statutory identity of President Jonathan. Don't necessarily President Jonathan as a person, but the fact that he's been president before and he may not necessarily be sworn in, he cannot necessarily run more than once. But let's also remember that there's
briefly.
Sorry. But there's an underlying controversy around President Jonathan again, I remember when he wanted to contest a few years ago, 2 senior advocates, collided, I remember Femi Falana, SAN, said he cannot be sworn in a 3rd term, and of course Michael Ozekome, SAN as well, also countered.
So it could potentially be controversial.
Yeah, I said he can
and
be
it
sworn
might end up in court.
Yeah, so it's just going to be a lot more back and forth, and
those are good points to bring up.
Yeah.
Baba Yusuf, let us assume that he's going to run. I mean, that's an assumption, obviously, because, we don't know whether he wants to or not. But we saw the level of disgruntlement that manifested in the North during the recent End Bad Governance protest. Is all that tied to this attempt to hold the Tinubu administration responsible for the current level of hardship in Nigeria, which appears to be hitting the North harder than other parts of the country? Is this a sort of grudge match to say, well, we're going to punish you for this by coming up with somebody, or, what's the idea behind this? And what are you hearing? Because, you're in the sort of upper echelons of, of political and traditional circles in the North.
Thank you very much, Charles. Yeah, to an extent, yes, but I think that is just a by the way. I think I would speak to the political dynamics. Traditionally, 1 year has passed since a new administration. We are building to the next administration. So the political gladiators are beginning to, go on to what you call in strategy their master plan, to start building the master plan. We heard some voices, if you recall, 3-4 weeks ago, and talking about potentially coming together with a view to getting a veritable opposition person to contest 2027, potentially against President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Of course, the agitations, ongoing even before the End Bad Governance, and the potentially what will come in the future, especially with regards to the feedback given by the handlers of Mr. President, is giving reason why people are beginning to think of alternatives, Charles, because to be honest, in the last 1 year, the opposition has been in tatters. We have not had any constructive engagement. So complacency has set in the administration, sense of entitlement and the way they insult people, because there is no veritable opposition. So to me, it's a welcome development so that the government in power will wake up and recognize that 8, 9, 10, 15 years ago, they were in the trenches, challenging the government in power. With regard to Jonathan, former President Jonathan also, I think, to add to what Prof said, for those that are, that want the balance and the unity, to promote balance and unity, which I spoke about in my broadcast to Nigerians last week, that power will certainly have to stay in the South in 2027. For those that want to demonstrate that unity, should prevail in this country. No apologies to those that say power has to go back to the North, because as far as I'm concerned, like I always say, politicians are same actors, different costumes. That being said, so far, former President Jonathan stands heads above shoulders, against any other person for now in terms of pedigree and experience, you know, to come and say maybe for a political party to contest. Of course, let us not forget, we have a Peter Obi factor right there. And 2027, I think, is something very interesting to watch. So the emergence of this conversation also, for those that understand politics, presupposes that this conversation has gone further than what we are seeing, you know, in the public domain. So it's game on as far as I'm concerned.
Well, that's very interesting. And let's leave it at that, because we've got other things to talk about, unless you have something you're desperately trying to add to it. So let me move on to the next thing, which is the seizure of the Nigerian presidential jets for a breach of contract.
Yes.
The Nigerian government argues that the Chinese firm which alleges this breach of contract has no right to tamper with federal government property and has an agreement with Ogun State. And the issue revolves around a free trade zone. I'm going to come to you about that. That's one of the reasons we mentioned in your intro, because you're very familiar with it. But what is your thinking on this, Prof?
Well, I think generally each time countries of the South or developing countries, you know, go into agreement, you know, with countries of the North or developed countries, you know, sophisticated countries, which we often do, we should understand that there's a subtest, you know, of the fact that we're not strong enough, you know, we're at liberty, we're at their mercy. At some point, we're going to be obligated to them. Within those agreements, there's often a devil in those details, you know. We cannot negotiate with them, we cannot deal with them on equal terms, you know. At some point, you know, they can turn things around us. Unfortunately, maybe China, those days, would not be classified as a country in the North, but it has emerged and become a very powerful country, which is why, in many regards, they are very, very helpful. That's one point. So I'm not surprised that this kind of development is coming. But again, I've tried to read as much as possible around this controversy, and I think I want to believe to a very large extent, you know, the testimony or the details volunteered by former Governor Ibikunle Amosun. You know, it was very, very detailed, and he took some decisions. Sometimes you take some decision as honestly as possible, but somebody who is mischievous may just want to turn it around, you know, to hurt you. That's what I see happen.
There's an agreement.
No.
There's a contract.
There's a contract.
And the contract spells out the terms
but
of
it
the
was
agreement.
stated that the contractor, you know, that is now doing this against us was supposed to be an interim manager. You know, and of course, contracts are not necessarily cast in stone. At some point, of course, it can be terminated, subject to agreements. You know, subject to you meeting the conditions subject to you meeting the conditions of the termination.
Right.
So this is what happened, and I believe that whatever happens at the end of the day, first, the contractors or the Chinese firm went too far, and I do not believe that they are not doing this to us because we are Nigeria, you know, a developing country with problematic perception in the world at large. And maybe overall, I also believe that it can be resolved, you know, through diplomatic means. And going by the account of former Governor Amosu, if we get the support of the Chinese government and the province in China, you know, that testified against them, you know, in any court of law, I think that we might be able to turn the table against them.
Right. Okay. Let me come to you, Baba Yusuf, because your thoughts are particularly relevant, because this revolves around a free trade zone. I mean, the contractual agreement, of which you are very familiar with, because you were the first substantive MD and CEO of the first airport free trade zone in Nigeria. Given that clearly well-informed background, what do you think of the seizure of the Nigerian presidential jets?
Thank you very much for calling me to speak about this topic, because it's very important to me, Charles. And by the way, to add to that, which you said so that we can speak to the issues, I'm also a member of the World Free Trade Zone organization, so we understand also the international dimension to this. It's a very sad and embarrassing situation we find ourselves, Charles. And that is the problem that we keep on creating, and some of us spoke to these issues a couple of years ago, and we run into issues because people don't want to hear the truth. And those truths we were talking about 5-6 years ago are manifesting in the case of Ogun. And I would like the federal government, I will seize this opportunity to call on Mr. President to reevaluate all our special economic zones agreements where we have mostly handshaking with international, investors, not just Chinese. Now, speaking to this particular issue, I listened and I read, and of course, before it blew up, I was following very carefully, because within the international circle of special economic zones, these conversations was actually going on. And that is why it's pathetic. I'm sorry I have to use the word pathetic. We sat on our hands, Charles, for almost, 10, 15 years, when this thing was snowballing into a combustible issue that, blew up on our face. Like you rightly said, there is a subsisting agreement. And what makes this case a bit different is because it is also an agreement that is leaning on a bilateral agreement between China and Nigeria that was signed up in 2001, that gave provisos. Now, the issue, with due respect to Governor Amosu, he confessed to have made a mistake, and that is where I will start from fundamentally. How come we did not undertake due diligence before a governor signed off, not just Ogun State assets, but the territorial integrity of our country? And this has become a corporate culture in corporate Nigeria. I thought that the first thing to do is to go through the details of that agreement, one, and to do what you call, engagement with the critical stakeholders too, because there are two layers of engagement. And with regards to those that are saying, yes, we can yank it off, you can't yank it off. In international, agreements, even within Nigeria,
you're bound by the agreement.
And more importantly, you have rules of engagement. One, there is penalty clause. Two, there is exit clause.
Yeah.
How did we get ourselves into this? And when and if an executive governor, without prejudice to his reason, decides to do that, why didn't we go to the sequence of the rules of engagement so that we protect the asset of this country? But it appears it was a political decision. That being said, now we have found ourselves, because even when the matter went to the US and went to the UK, and we still had opportunity to go and engage and stop this process, but we didn't. And these people now leaned on it. Of course, I'm not supporting the taking over of our, the presidential fleet, but I think also part of the problem is we go into this engagement without strategy. People say I sound like a broken record, but anything without strategy is kaput. Why am I saying so? You are dealing with the Chinese, who come to you with a master plan to ensure that they protect their own investment. Why didn't you do the same? I think what they did is to play this hand to push us to the wall so that we can react. And at the end of the day, now they have forced us to a negotiation table so that we can have a conversations for them to have an exit. Right. I believe that is what they have done. Right. And I hope government will engage constructively without sense of entitlement.
They basically want to be paid compensation.
Absolutely. And we should engage them, because it is already having a ripple effect on our FDI engagements, which I'll speak about later.
Right. Well, I mean, Prof, there are two things here. I mean, number one, I think you kind of touched on this at the outset. The assets they've seized don't belong to Ogun State. Yeah. So you have to wonder what the basis was for a French court order, for the seizure of the presidential jets. The other thing is that I think Baba Yusuf touched on that. This could obviously really give Nigeria a bad name with foreign investors and scare them all away.
Yeah, unfortunately, but it also tells us that these fellows can be very, very vicious, and we have a lot that we are doing with them. It's a lesson for us to be very careful. And overall, if you look at the history of partnership with foreign countries, you will see that without necessarily being biased towards West, you see that the West are much more considerate than some of these Eastern countries. If you hear what Chinese, have done in Zambia or Zimbabwe, taking over assets and
slightly more brutish.
Very brutal. and maybe we should be very careful going forward. And of course, we should also learn our lessons, in the area of knowing that in business, in transactions, there's probably nothing like emotions or sentiments, And these guys are very litigious, They are very ready anytime, to take us to court, and strangulate us as much as possible. cause us further embarrassment, irrespective of the ones we are already suffering. Look at this company, for instance. Before they succeeded in France, they were in the United States, they were in the United Kingdom. So they were all over the world, waiting for, choice assets, and they know the implication of an aircraft, for instance, and they got it at the end of the day. But like I said earlier, I'm very hopeful that if the government, I can believe, if they know their onions, I'm sure we can remedy this situation.
On that note, I'm really sorry we're out of time. It's always, you guys have so much to say, and it's just so illuminating having a chat with you. But Professor Abiodun Adeni is a current affairs analyst, Dean of the School of Postgraduate Studies at Bayes University, Abuja. And of course, Baba Yusuf is a policy strategist, group CEO of the Global Investment and Trade Company, and a special economic zones expert. Thank you very much indeed. That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, bye-bye. Thank you for watching.
Thank you so much for watching the program. I appreciate you for your patience to watch from beginning to end. I hope you have learned a lot from this very program that I just played, this video. Please like and share the video. Share to all platforms. After sharing the video, now you can go to the comment section and put down your comments. Whatever suggestions, contributions you have to make, what do you think about the video I just played? Go to the comment section and put your comment. I will go to the comment section, and I bet you I am learning a lot from there, and you can equally learn from there. Let us share our experience on that comment section. Thank you so much, and stay blessed. Don't forget to share, and we continue to bless you as you share. Biafra government, peace, progress, unity, and equity. We move.